The spy who loved me once dazzled the world with the towering menace of Jaws, the icy precision of Agent Anya, and Roger Moore's effortless charm. But the real tragedies happened when the cameras stopped rolling. On-set accidents, broken marriages, decades-long addictions, and sudden deaths, all quietly hidden from the public eye. Join us as we uncover their names and the truth about where they are in 2025 that will leave Bond fans absolutely stunned. Bernard Lee as M. Bernard Lee was born on the 10th of January, 1908 in Brentford, Middlesex, England. At 69 years old, he played M, the stern, unshakable head of MI6 in The Spy Who Loved Me, 1977. That performance cemented him as the definitive M for an entire generation. His personal life, however, was marked by wounds far deeper than his authoritative characters suggested. His first marriage to Gladys Meridew endured decades of hardship before ending in a tragedy that scarred him permanently. The house fire that took her life also destroyed a part of him he never rebuilt. When he later married Ursula McHale, she walked into a life filled with grief he could not articulate. Even as he filmed The Man with the Golden Gun and Moonraker, the emotional weight he carried often followed him to set, blurring the line between duty and suffering. His body began failing long before he admitted anything was wrong. Sharp stomach pains interrupted rehearsals, and he often stepped out between scenes to steady himself against a wall. Doctors urged him to slow down, but he feared stepping away from Bond meant losing the last stable part of his life. The cancer worsened during the filming years. Fatigue, vomiting, and severe weight loss made each day a quiet battle. He died on the 16th of January, 1981 at the age of 73, after a rapid decline in a London hospital with Ursula by his side. At the time of his passing, his lifetime earnings, including his Bond career, amounted to an estimated net worth of $5 million, a modest sum compared to the profound emotional cost behind it. Desmond Llewelyn as Q. Desmond Llewelyn was born on the 12th of September, 1914 in Newport, Wales. At 62 years old, he played Q, the quietly brilliant mind behind Bond's gadgets, in The Spy Who Loved Me, 1977. His calm presence on screen became a cornerstone of the franchise for decades. His marriage to Pamela had the tenderness of two people who tried their best, yet the distance created by constant filming slowly carved a quiet gap between them. The Bond schedule was punishing. Promotional tours across continents, rehearsals that stretched into the night, and shoots that pulled him away for months at a time. Even when he filmed Chitty Chitty Bang Bang, the long days on set meant Pamela often ate dinner alone. Their love never collapsed, but it lived inside long pauses. As age crept in, the demands of the role became heavier. The long hours spent standing under hot studio lights left him trembling backstage, and recurrent faint spells forced him to sit during rehearsals. He brushed it off as exhaustion, refusing to let weakness interrupt the character fans adored. When he filmed The World Is Not Enough, the pressure of performing Q's elaborate dialogue while hiding fatigue became almost unbearable, yet he insisted on finishing. No one imagined those were the last months of his life. He died at 85 on the 19th of December, 1999 in East Sussex after a devastating head-on collision while driving home from a book signing. The internal injuries were fatal, and he passed away shortly after reaching the hospital. At the time of his death, his Bond royalties and lifetime work amounted to an estimated net worth of $10 million, a quiet legacy for a man whose brilliance had always lived in the background. Lois Maxwell as Miss Moneypenny. Lois Maxwell was born on the 14th of February 1927 in Kitchener, Ontario, Canada. At 52 years old, she played Miss Moneypenny, MI6's discreet, razor-witted secretary, in The Spy Who Loved Me, 1977. By that point, the role had already defined her public life for 15 years. But behind that polished presence was a private life beginning to unravel. Her marriage to television executive Peter Marriott deteriorated steadily, as Bond's production schedule kept her abroad for months at a time. While she filmed The Haunting and various European projects, he entered a pattern of affairs that eventually surfaced publicly within the BBC circle. Maxwell returned home to tense silences, financial disputes over his debt, and the reality that her rising visibility only widened the divide. Their 1966 divorce left her responsible for 2 children, a mortgage, and the pressure of maintaining steady work in an industry that often sidelined older actresses. As she pushed through later Bond films, early signs of illness began to interfere with her routine. Lost lines, missed appointments, and moments of cognitive fog she tried to conceal on set. By the time she earned a Golden Globe nomination for Haunted Honeymoon, doctors quietly suggested the early onset of Alzheimer's. She continued working, but the gaps in memory became longer, and the franchise's decision to move on after A View to a Kill hit harder than she admitted. She was losing both her defining role and her grip on her own mind at the same time. In 2025, at 98 years old, she lives in full-time care, drifting between recognition and confusion. Her estimated $3 million net worth, built from Bond residuals, television work, and decades of persistence, now sustains her medical needs. The woman once known for her quick wit and control now faces the slow, irreversible fading of the memories that made her iconic. Geoffrey Keen as Minister of Defense. Grey Geoffrey Keen was born on 21st August 1916 in Wallingford, Oxfordshire, England. At 61 years old, he played Minister of Defense Frederick Grey in The Spy Who Loved Me, 1977. The role anchored him as a steady presence across 6 Bond films. Yet as his authority on screen grew, the strain on his private world deepened. His marriage to Madeleine Howell, once grounded in wartime resilience, slowly buckled under his relentless workload. Post-war financial instability had forced him into teaching jobs, and when films like The Third Man and Dr. Zhivago revived his career, he spent much of the 1960s and 70s filming abroad. The long separations left practical burdens on Madeleine, managing children, household finances, and her own declining stamina. Their letters during productions reveal a marriage held together more by duty than closeness, though neither ever chose to walk away. When Madeleine's health collapsed in the late 1980s, Keen abandoned nearly all remaining acting offers to care for her. Hospital records later confirmed he spent months sleeping in waiting rooms, managing her medications, and refusing outside help. Her passing in 1990 left him emotionally and physically depleted. Within a year, worsening heart problems forced him into permanent retirement. The public saw a distinguished character actor fading. Privately, he was a widower struggling to rebuild a life that no longer felt purposeful. He died on the 3rd of November 2005 at age 89 from heart complications at Denville Hall, the retirement home for actors. His estimated $4 million net worth, earned from an astonishing 100-film career, was left primarily to his surviving family. And just as in his Bond roles, he departed quietly, carrying the weight of a life shaped as much by loyalty as by loss. Walter Gotell as General Gogol. Walter Gotell was born on the 15th of March 1924 in Bonn, Germany. At 53 years old, he played General Gogol, the cool, calculating yet unexpectedly humane head of the KGB, in The Spy Who Loved Me, 1977. That single performance shifted him from a reliable character actor into a defining face of Cold War cinema. But while his career found clarity, his personal life was quietly fracturing. His marriage to Yvonne Mitchell began with the determination of 2 immigrants rebuilding their lives, yet distance became the silent third partner in their relationship. Months spent shooting The Guns of Navarone and later Lawrence of Arabia left her carrying their home and daughter alone. By the time he returned from an extended location shoot, the emotional thread connecting them had thinned beyond repair. Their divorce left Gotell with a regret he rarely voiced. Illness appeared years later, at the height of his recognition as Gogol. Persistent coughing and tightening in his chest followed him from one Bond set to the next, symptoms he brushed aside to avoid losing work. Cold War criticism surrounding his portrayal of a Soviet official only added stress he carried silently into his second marriage with Joy Wei. When doctors finally delivered the diagnosis, lung cancer already advanced, Gotell focused on one final goal: finishing The Living Daylights. He completed it, but the effort drained what strength he had left. He died on the 5th of May, 1997, at the age of 73, the cancer having spread faster than treatment could slow it. His final days were spent in quiet companionship with Joy, drifting between sleep and shallow breaths as his body surrendered. His net worth, around $2 million, reflected a lifetime of steady work rather than stardom. Roger Moore as James Bond. Roger Moore was born on the 14th of October, 1927, in London, England. At 49 years old, he played James Bond, the smooth, irresistible 007, in The Spy Who Loved Me, 1977. It became one of his defining turns, establishing the lighter, mischievous Bond that reshaped the franchise. Yet while audiences adored him, his private life was unraveling behind closed doors. His marriage to Dorn Van Steen collapsed under the weight of infertility, financial strain, and arguments that never seemed to end. His second marriage to Dorothy Squires suffered in harsher ways: jealous confrontations, public accusations, and a growing imbalance fueled by Moore's rising fame. When he later married Luisa Mattioli, stability seemed possible. But the constant attention around Bond reignited insecurity. On-set chemistry with co-stars, months spent filming abroad, and the relentless press attention turned their household into a place of suspicion rather than comfort. By the time Moore stepped away from the Bond role, their marriage had already fractured beyond saving. Illness shadowed him quietly throughout his years as 007. Chronic joint pain made stunts agonizing, yet he forced himself to reach the role. Kidney stones hospitalized him during filming. Later came prostate cancer, diabetes, and a tumor found in his liver. His fourth marriage to Christina Tholstrup finally gave him steadiness, but their shared years were marked by treatments, surgeries, and the slow awareness that his time was narrowing. He died on 23 May 2017 at the age of 89 in Switzerland after a prolonged fight against lung and liver cancer. He was laid to rest in Monaco Cemetery, a quiet hillside he had always loved. At his passing, his net worth stood at an estimated $90 million, built through film, television, and a lifetime of humanitarian work with UNICEF. Richard Kiel as Jaws. Richard Kiel was born on the 13th of September 1939 in Detroit, Michigan. At 38 years old, he played Jaws, the towering, steel-toothed assassin in The Spy Who Loved Me, 1977. His size turned him into an instant Bond icon, but it also carried a lifetime of pain he rarely spoke about. Marriage brought the stability Kiel had never found in his career. His union with Diane Rogers in 1974 became a refuge from the industry that typecast him as monsters and mutants. But tragedy struck decades later when Diane died in 2014, leaving him emotionally shattered. Their 40-year marriage had survived long separations, health scares, and the strain of raising 4 children, while he battled depression from being boxed into roles defined only by his size. Health problems followed him relentlessly. At 7'1", every stunt was a risk, and during Bond, he suffered a violent car flip accident that caused lasting spinal damage. Chronic pain, mobility issues, and breathing problems became part of his daily life. He continued accepting roles like Happy Gilmore, but each performance required more physical effort than audiences ever imagined. He died on 10th September 2014 at the age of 74, only days before his birthday. His final hours were spent in hospital after his heart began to fail, exhaustion overwhelming a body that had carried too much for too long. His estimated $1 million net worth, built from decades of consistent but typecast work, now supports the family he devoted his life to. Caroline Munro as Naomi. Caroline Munro was born on the 16th of January 1949 in Windsor, England. At 28 years old, she appeared in The Spy Who Loved Me, 1977, as Naomi, the seductive helicopter-flying assassin whose brief screen time made her an unforgettable Bond girl. The role brought worldwide attention. Her rise was fast, yet the compromises demanded of her were sharper than most ever knew. Her first marriage to musician Judd Hamilton unraveled under the strain of distance. While Munro shot horror films across Europe and juggled modeling contracts in London, Judd remained in the U.S. working on music projects. Weeks apart turned into months, and every reunion came with new arguments about career sacrifices neither wanted to make. Their 1980 divorce left her emotionally bruised and wary of the instability fame brought into her private life. A decade later, she found steadier ground with actor George Dugdale, building a calmer home and raising two daughters that softened the turbulence of her earlier years. Career pressures carried their own weight. As a model-turned-actress, Munro constantly fought off sexual harassment and unwanted propositions that dominated the 1970s film world. Her refusal to do nude scenes cost her major roles at Hammer and several American studios, forcing her into supporting parts, even as her face appeared on magazine covers worldwide. Projects like Dracula A.D. 1972 and Captain Kronos cemented her cult fame. In 2025, she is 76 years old, living a healthy and active life while continuing occasional television and horror festival appearances. Her estimated net worth of $500,000 reflects a career built more on principle than profit, a lifetime of choosing dignity over shortcuts. Barbara Bach as Anya Amasova. Barbara Bach was born on 28 August 1947 in New York City. At 30 years old, she played Anya Amasova, the poised, deadly KGB agent in The Spy Who Loved Me, 1977. The role turned her into an international sensation overnight, even as her personal life quietly began to fracture. Her first marriage to Count Augusto Gregorini ended under the weight of distance and diverging ambitions. Work in Europe pulled her away from home, and by the time she returned, their connection had dried into polite silence. The divorce left her raising two children while navigating a career that demanded beauty above well-being. When she later fell in love with Ringo Starr on the set of Caveman, 1981, it felt like salvation, but also the beginning of a new battle neither anticipated. Alcohol became the shadow of her adult life. After Bond, pressure and loneliness pushed her into heavy drinking, spiraling into dependency that nearly cost her everything. Ringo struggled with his own addictions, and their marriage weathered nights of shouting, relapses, and the dull ache of two people trying to save each other while drowning themselves. Their joint entrance into rehab in 1988 marked the turning point. 4 weeks that felt like years, but it pulled them back from the edge. In 2025, she is 78 years old, living quietly with Ringo, both sober for decades. Her estimated $10 million net worth, shared with her husband, now funds their Lotus Foundation and the recovery programs she once desperately needed. George Baker as Captain Benson. George Baker was born on the 1st of April 1931 in Varna, Bulgaria. At 46 years old, he appeared in The Spy Who Loved Me, 1977, as Captain Benson, returning to the Bond universe after earlier roles in the franchise. By then, he was already admired, but the weight he carried was heavier than audiences ever saw. His earliest injuries from World War II followed him into adulthood, shaping his temperament and every relationship he entered. PTSD haunted his private life. Sudden mood shifts, nights of panic, and long stretches of emotional withdrawal that strained his first 2 marriages until they broke under the pressure. It was only with Julia Oxenford, his third wife, that he found steadier ground, though even then he struggled to let peace in. The stress of stage and television work often clashed with the fragile stability he tried to build at home. During Claudius, and the early years of Inspector Wexford, fatigue and recurring chest infections slowed him down, reminders that his wartime wounds had never fully healed. When a stroke struck in his later years, the recovery was incomplete, and pneumonia soon turned every breath into a battle he could not win. He died on 7th October 2011 at the age of 80, the combination of stroke complications and pneumonia ending a life marked by brilliance and unspoken pain. His estimated $2 million net worth reflected decades of stage, television, and Bond work, steady, respected, and earned through perseverance rather than fame. He was laid to rest in England, far from the wars that scarred him, leaving behind a legacy richer than his quiet final years suggested. Michael Billington, as Sergei Barsov. Michael Billington was born on 24th December 1941 in Blackburn, England. At 36 years old, he played Sergei Barsov, Agent XX's doomed lover, in The Spy Who Loved Me, 1977. It was his only Bond appearance, yet the role carried the weight of a dream he chased for most of his life. Marriage could not shield him from the disappointment that followed. He wed Rachel Thomas and built a family he loved, but each failed James Bond audition carved deeper cracks into their relationship. 5 screen tests, 5 rejections, and 5 long stretches of silence around the house as he withdrew into himself. The tension grew unbearable. The divorce left him hollow, holding a career that seemed permanently stuck in almost. The emotional collapse that followed pushed him into a destructive cycle. Alcohol became both escape and punishment, especially as the offers slowed and roles like UFO and the On-Din line became distant memories. Moving to the United States promised a fresh start, but the loneliness there only sharpened his depression. By the time he returned to Britain, he was battling cancer. Weakened by years of personal and professional disappointment he carried with a dignity few ever noticed. He died on the 3rd of June 2005 at the age of 63, cancer claiming him quietly after months of decline. His estimated $800,000 net worth reflected a lifetime of steady but unfulfilled work, talent overshadowed by the role he never got to play. Jurgens as Karl Stromberg. Jurgens was born on the 12th of December 1915 in Soln, Munich, Germany. At 62 years old, he played Karl Stromberg, the cultured, cold billionaire villain in The Spy Who Loved Me, 1977. It was his only Bond film, yet one that showcased the commanding presence that defined his career. His love life mirrored the turbulence of the world he survived. Married 5 times, every relationship dissolved under the weight of infidelity, emotional distance, and the scars he carried from the war. His years under the Nazi regime, being banned from acting and sent to a political internment camp, left him volatile and restless, moving from one marriage to another. Even when he found brief comfort in later relationships, the ghosts of earlier betrayals never truly loosened their grip. War trauma lingered long after peace returned. Alcohol became his companion through post-war depression, especially as he relived the humiliation of being labeled politically unreliable. Even as The Longest Day and An God-Created Woman turned him into an international star, he worked relentlessly, more out of necessity than ambition, pushing through chest pains and fatigue that foreshadowed the heart failure to come. He died on the 18th of June, 1982, at the age of 66, a massive heart attack ending a life marked by brilliance and battles no one truly understood. His estimated $5 million net worth reflected a career that spanned more than 100 films. Sidney Taffler as Liparus Captain. Sidney Taffler was born on 31st July 1916 in London, England. At 61 years old, he appeared in The Spy Who Loved Me, 1977, as the captain of the Liparus supertanker, delivering his final major film performance. It was a brief role, but one that crowned a long career shaped by resilience more than recognition. His marriage to actress Joy Shelton was the one constant that steadied him through decades of professional disappointment. They built a quiet life with 3 children, even as he struggled with the humiliation of being pushed aside from major stages and confined to secondary roles. The poverty of his childhood never left him completely, and every rejected audition reopened old wounds of not being enough. Joy supported him through the worst of it. Illness crept in as he tried to hold on to his place in the industry. Cancer weakened him during his final years, draining the energy he once poured into Shakespeare, crime films, and television dramas. Even while touring barefoot in the park with Joy, he hid pain behind rehearsed smiles and the need to keep providing for his family. He died on the 8th of November 1979 at the age of 63, cancer claiming him after a rapid decline. His estimated $1 million net worth, built across theater, film, and television, now belongs to the family he devoted his life to. Nadim Sawalha as Aziz Fekesh. Nadim Sawalha was born on the 9th of September 1935 in Madaba, Jordan. At 42 years old, he played Aziz Fekesh in The Spy Who Loved Me, 1977, the first of 2 Bond films he would eventually join. For him, the role symbolized not fame, but survival. One more step in a life rebuilt from displacement. Marriage grounded him in ways the industry never could. With his wife, Safia Alfasi, he found stability after years of feeling like an outsider in a country that treated him with suspicion. Raising daughters, including actress Julia Sawalha, became the emotional center of his life, especially during periods when work dried up or when typecasting reduced him to background characters. Every small victory came with private frustration, decades in the profession, yet always the Arab guest role, always the outsider. The emotional strain of constant rejection left its mark. The racism and prejudice he faced in 1960s and 1970s, Britain pushed him into long periods of doubt, wondering whether leaving Jordan had been a mistake. But he refused to let bitterness harden him, taking roles in The Living Daylights, Sinbad, and later acclaimed Jordanian films to prove he was more than what casting directors assumed. Through it all, family kept him steady, offering the acceptance the industry withheld. In 2025, he is 90 years old, living quietly with his family and revisiting Jordan whenever he can. His estimated net worth of $1.5 million reflects a lifetime of steady but often underappreciated work. Yet his real legacy lies in the breakthroughs he made for Middle Eastern actors in Britain. One man who endured prejudice, persevered, and lived long enough to see his daughters achieve the opportunities he was denied. In the end, every one of these actors carried a story far heavier than what we saw on screen. Their triumphs, their heartbreaks, their quiet battles, each one shaped the world behind The Spy Who Loved Me in ways the audience never imagined. Which actor's story surprised you the most? Hey de la Ikien Kwaban Benzui. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow for more untold Bond stories.